Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Tony Lewis with Sangoma Technologies, and I want to welcome everyone for attending the Sangoma IP Phone webinar. I'm going to be talking a little bit about Sangoma IP Phones and their tight integration to FreePBX and their ease of provisioning. First, we're going to run through a little webinar and just talk a little bit about the phones. Then we're going to get into actually showcasing the phones, connecting with a fresh install of FreePBX, showing off the zero-touch provisioning, and how simple the hot desking features and different things are. So we will get started here. So we have a line of phones that we've launched. General availability will be end of March for these. We have shipped out hundreds of them to different partners and distributors around the world the last 2 and 3 months, getting a lot of feedback, working through bugs and kinks like any piece of software has. I feel we're at a very stable platform at this point. Very few issues are coming in, and the general availability, as I said, for these phones will be end of March and early April, depending regions and different areas. So the current line of phones has 3 phones as part of the family: our S300, our S500, and our S700. I think of them as an entry, mid, and exec is the current line in this model. The S300 has a backlit display, non-color, HD voice, built-in 5-way conference calling. So a lot of traditional phones have 3-way. Recently, some more manufacturers have started doing 4-way. I think some might do some 5-way now. All of our phones, including our entry level, will do native 5-way conference calling, headset compatible, built-in speaker phone for hands-free calling, and allowing for 2 different SIP account registrations. And it's a 10100 PoE port with a pass-through PC pass-through port. Our mid-level is what we call our enterprise level, our S500, and that is a full-color display with 28 programmable keys. There's 4 on each side with 4 pages of more buttons. So the bottom right key toggles you between the pages. It's headset compatible, including EHS, DHGS. Currently in our wiki, we list the compatible headsets. We've tested this with about 12, 13 different headsets from Jabra and Plantronics. So our current supported headsets are listed in our wiki, and they're the Jabra, the modern Jabra line, and the Plantronics line currently. Again, 5-way native conference calling, built-in speakerphone. 4 SIP accounts, so up to 4 different registrations, and this is a 10100 plus gigabit PC port, LAN port and PC port, pass-through port with PoE, of course. And then our S700, which is our executive level phone. Again, a full color display, a much larger display, a 4.3-inch display on this phone. Up to 45 programmable buttons. Again, headset compatible with EHS and DHGS. HD voice, 5-way conference calling, the built-in speakerphone, and 6 SIP accounts on this phone. And again, 10100 plus gigabit PoE, and then a pass-through PC port. All these phones are fully integrated with the FreePBX phone app. So we have a commercial module called Phone Apps, which lets you do a bunch of interacting with your phone with FreePBX. This is a current module that people pay for other phones, such as I believe Astra and Digium and a couple other brands. It's an add-on that we build. With Sangoma phones, all the apps are supported, and they're very tightly integrated and much more fluid than most of the other manufacturers are, because we wrote the phone apps, we write the software on the Sangoma phone, we can tightly integrate it better. And it's included for free with Sangoma phones. So if you happen to use Sangoma phones, you don't have to pay for the phone apps commercial module on FreePBX. And the same is true with Endpoint Manager. You'll notice when we do our live demo in a little bit, we don't actually go and buy Endpoint Manager or phone apps. They'll work out of the box on FreePBX with Sangoma phones. Zero-touch provisioning. You hear a lot of manufacturers talk about zero-touch provisioning, and we really want to accomplish zero-touch provisioning. And one of our biggest holdouts on zero-touch in the beginning was security. So if you know anything about how zero-touch works, or what's referred to as redirect servers on most phone manufacturers, the phone out of the factory will reach out to the redirect server. If you've informed the redirect server, this MAC address should point to this IP address to find its configuration file, the phone will hit the redirect server, give it its MAC address, and that redirect server will say, go to this IP address. Well, that's great if the IP address it's going to is a LAN IP, a private IP. But if that's a public IP, you've got a hosted system like FreePBX hosting, or your own hosted system, or your remote employees, you're now giving out that IP address to the whole world, that public IP address. And probably in most scenarios, you don't have a firewall in front of your provisioning server, your FreePBX server. So either TFTP or HTTP is wide open, and now I can go in and get the configuration files from your phone system and get your SIP username and password and connect the phone and start making calls. And you do this by going to other manufacturers' redirect servers and just walking down their whole range of MAC addresses they have, one after another, and it will just start sending back to you all the IP addresses for those phones where they get their configuration files from. So with our phones, we use Web of Trust, basically SSL signing. So we generate a certificate no different than using your website that we sign with our own CA server. And that certificate is unique to every single phone that leaves the manufacturer. So if we ship out 20,000 phones on an order, all 20,000 phones have a unique certificate that's tied to that hardware with that MAC address. So when the phone hits our redirect server and gives it the MAC address, we request back a copy of our signed certificate on that phone baked into the ROM of the phone. We verify that it hasn't been tampered and it is our signed certificate, and then we will tell that phone where to go and get its configuration file from. So this is a unique thing per phone. It's not something you could spoof. If somebody happens to hack your one phone and get your certificate, they can then hit our redirect server theoretically and be told where to go get a config file for your phone, but only for that one phone. So there's no open access to go in and just walk down our list of MAC addresses and get the configuration IP address if you happen to be using our redirect server. So how does redirect work? It's a pretty simple concept. When a phone comes from the factory, it first looks on the network and says, is there something on the network telling me how to reach the PBX? So option 66 or option 150 are typical protocols that people may run on their DHCP server. In the event that it receives an option 66 or 150 event, it will use that IP address to go get its configuration file from. In the event there is no option 66 or 150 and the phone has never been provisioned before, so it doesn't have a URL to get its configuration file from, it's going to reach out to us. It's going to hit this rs.sangoma.com, and it's going to hit us on an HTTP unencrypted request with its MAC address. We are then going to reply back and say, on HTTPS, say, we need you to send us your certificate for that MAC address. The phone will then send us a certificate. We validate it, that it hasn't been tampered, it's been signed by us. And if so, we send back to the phone where to go get it, a URL of where to go get its configuration file from. Once it gets that URL, the phone then redirects to that HTTP URL, which is your PBX. So in the event that you've set up your phone in FreePBX's endpoint manager and said, this MAC address belongs to this template and this user, and it built a configuration file for the phone is going to hit the PBX, give it its MAC address, and the PBX is going to send back to the phone the configuration file. And the phone's going to load it without a reboot on the fly. In the event that you haven't gone to Endpoint Manager yet and told it this MAC address uses this template with this user, the PBX is going to reply back with a login button. You're going to log in using your extension number and voicemail password, and the phone's going to load a default configuration into the phone. You can start making calls immediately. So when we say zero touch, we truly mean zero touch. I don't actually have to go in to Endpoint Manager and upload all these MACs and build these configuration files. It will build them on the fly as they log in using the default template. The other kind of unique thing on our phones is our VPN support. So a lot of other manufacturers have started adding VPN support. So in FreePBX with the system admin module, you can create a VPN server on the PBX, and you can create clients. And this takes a minute or two in the GUI. Very simple to do. You don't need to know anything about VPN to do it. And then an endpoint manager, you can link a client to an endpoint. And when that phone pulls its configuration file, it's going to get all the VPN information, including certificates, certs for that VPN, and the phone's going to connect across the VPN tunnel and do all of its communication, registration, phone apps, everything across that VPN tunnel. So it gets away from having to open up all these ports on your firewall for 5060 and HTTP for the web apps or the phone apps and everything else. All you have is a single VPN port open to the PBX, and now all your traffic is encrypted. So you don't need to do SLT or TLS or SRTP because everything's encrypted in the VPN tunnel already. So very simple to set up, tightly integrated into FreePBX to create the VPN server, and tightly integrated into Endpoint Manager to actually tell the phone to get its VPN information. So a quick summary on this, 3 phones, the S300, 500, and 700. They range from 2 to 6 zip accounts and up to 45 programmable buttons. They're all backlit LCDs. The mid-exec are color. They all support HD voice in speakerphones. They all support PoE and 10100 network. The mid-exec also support gigabit. They all support VPN. They all support 5-way conference calling. And coming out in May, the S500, 700, you'll be able to buy an expansion module for them. That'll be available GA in May. And you can link multiple expansion modules to the phones for additional BLS and programmable buttons. So that kind of concludes the quick overview of the presentation side of the phones. Now we're going to get into our dangerous demo and actually show you a brand new FreePBX install that we haven't even logged into yet. So we're going to have to create a username and password and create an extension on the system. And we're not going to go into endpoint and map these devices to extensions. We're going to use this login method with our redirect server. Now, as far as how the redirect server works, that's all built into the FreePBX and old Schmooze portal, which is the Sangoma portal. All the management of the MAC addresses of your phones and what IPs they should redirect to is all done inside our portal. You can redirect and move MACs to different deployments, which is considered a PBX in our portal for people that haven't used our portal before. And you link one or more phones to deployments, and it will automatically set all the redirects up in our server for you. Of course, you don't have to use our redirect. If you don't, for security reasons or whatever purpose, you don't want to use our redirect, it's not mandatory. It's there as a convenience to you guys to make provisioning and setup much quicker. So let's get up our GUI here. We're going to create a new user, so it's a brand new FreePBX install. In normal FreePBX, after you install, there's no default login, so we need to actually create a user to log in. So we are going to create our login and user here. And we're going to tell it to create. And from here, we can now log in, and we're going to be presented with normal FreePBX, what's called the out-of-box experience, which is some wizards of things that you need to set up. I can type right my password. So the first thing it's going to ask us is to activate our system. So activating your system is used to buy commercial modules or get paid support from Sangoma. So if we're using Sangoma phones and we want to use Endpoint Manager and phone apps, even though you don't have to buy them, you still have to activate your system for license reasons. So we're going to hit activate. And from here, we put in our portal email address. So if it recognizes the email address as a portal user, it's going to prompt for the password. If it doesn't recognize the email, it's going to have you create an account. So I'm going to put in my email here. And it's going to do a check, and it verified it exists in our portal, asked for the password for my account. And we hit login. And now it's going to show us our company information that the portal has, and we could update the information here if we wanted to, and hit continue. And now it says we need to activate our system, and it's asking for a friendly name to remember this location by. So I'm just going to put Tony Webinar and hit activate. So now the system's been activated against our license server. And then it's going to ask us a few other things that FreePBX goes through at a new install time. The first one is, hey, do you want to buy some of these commercial modules, these add-ons? Of course, we always encourage you to spend money with us and buy add-ons. But we're going to head and hit complete and not buy anything here. And then lastly, it's going to preserve, not quite last, Next thing it's going to present us with is the Sangoma FreePBX firewall, and it's going to ask you, would you like to go through a wizard and configure this software firewall on your PBX? On any production PBX, we always highly recommend using our firewall plus a firewall in front of it whenever possible. You can't ever have too many layers of security. So we're going to skip that here for our demo. And lastly, it's going to present us with SIP-Station, which is our SIP trunking service. It's going to say, if you want to get a free trial on this, we give away a 21-day free trial. You can buy a local DID in your market as part of the free trial and make and receive phone calls, and it auto provisions everything for you. So it's a great way to get basic trunking up right away on a new install if you want. You can start making and receiving calls within like 2 minutes of going through this wizard. We're going to hit not now because we don't need trunks for this. And we're done now. So we're in FreePBX. We've activated our system. And the thing we need to do now is we need to create an extension so we can register our phone. So we're going to go under Extensions in FreePBX. And we're going to use the new Quick Create option in FreePBX 13. And we're going to give it an extension number and a name. And then our email address, because this is how we would get like fax to email and different things in FreePBX, voicemail to email. Next, we're going to enable Find Me, Follow Me, and we're going to tell it to create a user account for this extension. That user account is used to do things like log into the user control panel. If you use Bria Cloud, it's your login for Bria. If you use iSymphony, it's your login for iSymphony. It's also needed to have a user account if you're going to use phone apps, because the phone apps talk to FreePBX against an API, and the API is a per-user API. So we need to have a user created that the phone can actually communicate for the phone apps across the API. And by default, it's going to add us to this all users group. So this is a group of permissions in User Manager and FreePBX. And these permissions say what you can do in UCP, what you can do with the REST apps or phone apps, what you could do with iSymphony, whether you can log in or not. So this is a default user permissions that we put on FreePBX when you install FreePBX. And if you happen to create your own user permissions here, you could add different user groups that you want to add this user to inherit permissions from. We're just going to leave it at the all users permission. And we're going to enable voicemail. We're going to set a password of 1234 and hit finish. So we've just created an extension in FreePBX. And just to verify here, we're going to go over to the sysadmin module in FreePBX and just show that we have nothing licensed on this box. So we don't have endpoint. We don't have phone apps. So under activation, we'll notice no commercial modules. We have a deployment ID, and that is it. Now we're going to run over to Endpoint Manager. And we're going to talk for a couple seconds on Endpoint Manager. The first thing about Endpoint Manager is what's called our global settings. And the two key things we need to worry about in global settings are the internal and external IP addresses that Endpoint Manager would use when it writes out phone configurations. So we auto-detected what the IP address was at install time of your local IP address and put it in as the internal IP. So if we have a phone that reaches out for a configuration file from the PBX and it doesn't have a configuration file for that MAC address, it's going to present you with a login button then it's going to use this internal IP address only. If we defined an external IP here, so let's just pretend we're going to define one here. Now our phone would actually get presented with an internal login and an external, because if we're internal to the network, that's generally an IP address that's not routable to the outside world. But if we're a remote user, we need to use the external IP. So by defining what the external IP is, we're going to have two different login options on our phone. The other thing about global settings to remember is this phone admin password. So any phones that get provisioned through Endpoint Manager, it's going to change the admin password of that phone to be whatever you define here. We defaulted to 62, so you can change it to be whatever you want. That's also the admin password you can use to log in any user. So by default, a user logs into their phone, if they're using our login feature, with their voicemail password. But in the event you're an admin user or you're the IT guy and you're logging in a bunch of people, you don't need to know their voicemail password. You can use this admin password. In the event an extension doesn't have a voicemail box, they can use this user password to log in to their phone. That user password is only used if the extension does not have a voicemail box set up. or voice mailbox created, I should say. So all we did was add the external IP. We haven't done anything else here. You'll notice in Endpoint Manager, anyone who, I'm assuming a lot of you guys are familiar with Endpoint Manager, there's a brand added of Sangoma already. And if we go to the Sangoma brand, there's going to be a default template that we created at install time automatically for you. We're going to click on this default template. And you're going to see it says it's been checked to be yes for the default internal template and no for the external. So what this means is, remember in global settings we set an internal IP address and the external. What that says is if a user logs into the phone and they use the internal button, this is the template you should apply for that user to create their configuration file. If they press the external button, we don't have a template for that. So we could go create the template that would be differently for the external, or we could set this one to yes if they could use the same template. Generally they can't, because generally this is going to be your internal IP address. We click this external, it's going to pull from global settings. I thought it would. It will pull from global settings your fully qualified domain name. I have an applied config, so it doesn't know about it. That's why. So I could have multiple. I could have a default internal template and a default external template. Is all we're showing here. So these are some global settings to do with Endpoint Manager. And if we get into our models now, so as we can see, by default on the S700, we have 4 buttons programmed. The first 3 are line keys, and the 4th one is an intercom. We're going to add a 5th button to be XML API, and we're going to add one of our phone apps. We're going to pick Follow Me. We're going to add one more, and we're going to pick Login or Log Out. It's the same function. And we're going to save this model now. Our regional settings deal with our time zone and time servers. So if we want to change the time servers it's going to use, or daylight savings, or what time zone, we would change it here. And under options are a whole bunch of other things for the phone. So for example, we can change the background image. We can enable multicasting and what addresses we want to listen to on multicast. We can change the default ringtone that the phone will play. By default, our ring 1 is our normal ringtone. You have 5 different ringtones you can pick from. So when it gets an inbound call, it'll use that ringtone. Label scrolling. So since it's an LCD display phone and the buttons are labels on the LCD, if the extension or the name of that button is really long, it'll get cut off. You can enable label scrolling, which will have that name marquee scroll on the button for you. So it'll scroll through whatever that long name is and constantly be scrolling through it. Some people like it, some it's a distraction. Our backlight timeout, since these are full color displays, are very bright, we can set a timeout. So if the phone's inactive for more than 300 seconds, we can tell it to set the inactive level to either be off or low. And then when the phone's in active state, we can set its active brightness level from 10 to 1. And that's how bright that backlight will be of the LCD. We can also enable screensavers, so you can have it do time and logo, or use the default photo, or upload your own custom photos. If you're using headsets, you can tell it to ring the phone, the headset, or both. If you don't want to hear the call waiting signal chirp at you when you get another call, but you have call waiting enabled, you can disable the actual signal. And then BLF alerts will be, if you have a BLF button monitoring any other extension on your phone system, you can turn on these alerts. So by default, the BLF button will blink when somebody's getting a call. You can turn on a visual alert that will actually pop up the caller ID of who's calling that BLF and what extension number. And you can actually intercept the call with that pop-up. Or you can turn on an audio alert, so it'll chirp at you when another user is receiving an inbound call, or you can turn on both. And lastly is hotline. So hotline is when you pick the receiver off the phone, it will automatically dial a phone number. So this is great in lobby phones where it's just pick up the phone and it will connect them to maybe a company directory or an IVR or something. So if we enable that, we just define the extension that it's going to be or number that it's going to dial. So we made a few changes here, so we're going to hit apply on this default template. So save this template. And all we've done is made some changes to our template. You wouldn't have to, or you could create a brand new template, or you could create 10 templates. Just wanted to kind of walk through some of the template options. The last two options in a template are redundancy. So by default, the phone's going to register to this IP address. And this internal and external pulls from those global settings. So it's going to use that IP address to register to. In the redundancy, we can set a backup IP address. So in the event that primary server is down and we can't reach it, this is the IP address the phone will try to register to. And then when the primary comes back up, because it keeps every 2 minutes retrying the primary, it moves back to the primary. And if you happen to be using an SBC or like a Vega, one of the Sangoma Vega gateways that have this what's called failover survivability or EMP mode built in, you'd have to proxy through that SBC or that Vega. So you can set your proxy address here, and you can set a backup proxy if you want to. So at this point, all we've done is modified our template a little bit. And we've got this nice, fresh factory phone here. And just to verify this is a factory phone, I'm logged into the GUI of it. And under status, you'll see it's disabled, account 1s, 2, and 3. And if we go look under account 1, there's no information, no IP address or anything. And if we go to management auto provision, we'll see it's set from the factory to go to our redirect server. So at this point, we are going to move over to our phone, and we are going to reboot our phone here. So now this is going to be like a brand new phone you just got from the factory, and you just plugged it into your network, and the phone's going to boot, and it's going to reach out to the redirect server, and the redirect server is going to direct it back to this 199.102.239.17, and we're going to get presented with a login screen because we have not ever told Endpoint Manager about this phone, so we haven't generated a config file for this phone yet. So while that's rebooting, in Endpoint Manager extension mapping, we could come in here and we could say extension 4100 that we just created a little bit ago is a Sangoma phone. And it's going to use the Sangoma default template. It's an S700 and its MAC address is some 12-character number. And this would build a configuration file for this phone. And this phone would grab this configuration file and load it automatically for us. But that's a lot of work. Now I got to go add all these MAC addresses all the time, know which MAC address is going to belong to what user on a new install, and I've got 50 phones to install. So in our scenario, we're not going to do this. We're going to leave it empty. We're going to refresh just to make sure we didn't save anything. And if we go back and look at the stream of our phone right now that's streaming, you will see we have two buttons, a login INT and a login EXT. Remember, in global settings, we set an internal IP and an external. So we don't know which one you want this phone to connect through. It may be an internal phone, it may be external. So we're going to hit our login internal button. And it's going to prompt us for the extension number. We created 4100, and then the voicemail password, or that admin password, and then hit done. And the phone's going to load its configuration from that default template that the internal, because we hit the internal button, so it's going to use whatever default template the internal is told to use. And you'll see now we have 3 line buttons of 4100. Then we have the 4th button is intercom, the 5th is follow me, and the 6th is our login button or log out button. So we can actually log out of this phone and log in as another user. When we do the login, log out of a phone that's registered, there's no rebooting happening. So I can log out of 4100 and log in as 4201, for example, and it will instantly log in about 2 seconds without ever rebooting that phone. So we can see now we have our template applied. And if we come back to FreePBX and we refresh that extension mapping and endpoint, it's going to have automatically put in all the information. So it said, you just logged in, so I'm going to create an extension mapping for you. So extension 4100 logged in. It's a Sangoma phone. It's using the Sangoma default template, an S700, and there's MAC address. So from here, if I had other templates, I could apply a different template. And anytime I make a change to the phone, I can tell it to update the phone without a reboot with this little button here that says force. Go to meeting, slide over. This button here, which says the force phone to check for config. This happens without a reboot. No different than if we go into the Sangoma default template right now. If we come in here and we bring up a model number like our S700, let's say we want to add a new button. So we're going to add an XML API, and we're going to call this the call forward one. And right now that's button 7. But one of the neat things about endpoint is if we wanted that to be button 4, for example, we can drag this up above 4 and hit save, and it's going to reorder everything for us now. So we've saved this model. And now down here, for the template, we can tell it to save, which is only going to save the changes to the database, not change any of the phone configs. Or we can tell it to save and rebuild the phone configs, which will rebuild the configs. Then you'd have to reboot your phone to get the config. Or we can say save, rebuild, and update the phone. If you watch the video stream in the phone now, it's going to update for that new button without a reboot of the phone. So it's going to push the configs, and it does this whether the phone's natted, local, or remote, doesn't matter, and it will go in and push and update the config on the phone. So now we see 4100, now that new call forward, then intercom, follow me, and log in. So we can push configs to phones without reboots, and it takes a few seconds for the phone to fully load the whole configuration file. If you're on an active call, when you push an update config to the phone, you don't lose your call. The screen may become unresponsive while it's loading the new buttons for that 2 or 3 seconds, but your whole active call and interacting with the keypad and different buttons on the phone minus the actual apps are not affected in any way while it's updating the config. So that's kind of showing the pushing configs to phones, provisioning phones, using the zero touch, making it really simple on a new install to bring phones up. The last couple things we're going to talk about is kind of they relate to ringtones. So in a template, we can set the default ringtone the phone will use when it receives a call. And that can be different on different templates. The other thing we can do is in FreePBX settings, advanced settings, you will notice we have the option to set the ringtone for internal extension calls. So if we come down here, this option right here, internal alert info. So it says inherit. So by default, it's going to use whatever the phone's default ringtone is. Or we can override it and pick between our 5 different ringtones that are used when I make an internal extension call. I can also change the ringtone when I do a blind transfer or an intended transfer. Now these are global settings across the whole system, but you can go ahead and set different ringtones for those actions. I can also change the ringtone in lots of places. For example, inbound routes. On a DID basis, I can set different ringtones per DID. So on a DID, I can set the ringtone. IVRs, I can set the ringtone. Ring groups, I can set the ringtone. Queues, follow me's, lots of different places in FreePBX. I can change the ringtone that the Sangoma phones would use when they're in that mode. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, an overview of the phones. And I guess we'll open it up for questions now. How about, one of the questions is, how about a camera module? Currently, no. The current line of phones won't support camera, Wi-Fi, or USB. So, we've got some other things that'll be coming out in the near future. So those will be definitely addressed in the coming future, but the current models, no. So the next question from Ron is, if I end up factory resetting one of these phones, will it come up stupid or will it try to look for Sangoma registration server? If you're using our redirect server, it will follow our redirect policy. So if you factory reset a phone, it's going to go back and start hitting our redirect server. So as long as you're using that, it's going to know how to hit the PBX. So that's really nice for end users if you use the redirect server, because now when an end user or an admin factory resets the phone, it's just going to hit the PBX again and pull its configuration. Next question from Ian. Headset compatibility. Are these compatible with Pletronics? Yes. So wiki.freepbx.org will lay out the actual models we've all tested, but full support on modern Pletronics and Jabra headsets. Scott asked, for EHS, does it require an adapter? Yes. So for the mid and exec, for EHS, there's a small little adapter, just like a SNOM and Yealink use, EHS adapter. We do that on purpose. It allows us to, as headsets change and connectors change and software really changes, it allows us to keep up with changes and not have to build a whole new phone because somebody's doing something different. And it's done at adapter level. Rich asks, is the display is backlit, but what about the keys and buttons? So all the 4 keys on the right side, so the mute, speaker, headset, and voicemail are all backlit. The others are not. Are the phones Bluetooth enabled? We covered that. No, not in the current model phones. There's not Bluetooth, but there are some things that will be coming out in the near future. Keith asks, are phones going to have VPN capabilities like, say, the ShoreTel phones? We do have remote users, and to set VPN would make things a lot more secure. Absolutely, we covered that early on. The phones have native VPN support using OpenVPN, and FreePBX has complete configuration of OpenVPN inside of the system admin module, and then hooks into endpoint to link extensions to clients in the VPN server. Jerome asks, how about pricing? So Jerome, phones are available in the U.S. currently with shipping end of March at 877-E4 VoIP and VoIPsupply.com. So both of those have phones available. You can order them now and get on the list for deliveries. I know they have a few left, but they've been selling them really quick. Hatham asks, are these phones manufactured by Yealink? No, Yealink's not involved in our phones. These are designs by us. This is our software on these phones. Yealink builds phones, just like Sangoma. Neither of us manufacture phones. Polycom doesn't manufacture their own phones. Nobody manufactures their own phones. So we design them, we build the software stack for them, and then use contract manufacturers like every other manufacturer does. Does the S300 support EHS? No, that's why on the 500, 700 we explicitly talk about EHS. So the 300 is non-EHS support. It's just a normal wired headset or a wireless headset, but you're not going to be able to answer or hang up from that headset. Jeff, yes, full support of OpenVPN. With the apps, is that for every user or every phone? I'm not sure what the question is, Laura, but the apps can be controlled on a per template basis, which apps are displayed to what users. So you have full control over that in Endpoint Manager by building templates. Rob Taggart, for years I've desired a central managed directory, not LDAP search, but a true browsable directory from the phone without having to manage the file on each phone. Will FreePBX and these phones have central management? Yes, so one of our phone apps is the contact button, and that contacts are completely managed from FreePBX GUI using the contact manager. So you can have it automatically add all your internal contacts. You can create multiple groups of contacts. So there can be a sales group and a support group. There can be external contacts that you can bulk import. And then you can control which contact groups users can see on their phone with the contact button. And it's a true phone application, meaning none of that contact information is stored on the phone. It's pulling the server and doing an API request to the server to get that information. This phone are compatible with other Asterisk systems. So all of our integration, all of our testing, all of our documentation, all relates to FreePBX. Our support line on these phones is related to FreePBX. The zero-touch provisioning, the phone apps, the VPN, everything we do is as it relates to FreePBX. These phones were designed from the ground up for FreePBX. Will they work with other systems, including Asterisk? Absolutely. Will you get support from us? Not at this time. We will only support these with FreePBX. We have to limit our scale of what we're testing against because we want to provide a very reliable phone at a quality price and provide top-notch support with these phones. And to do that, we need to control the environment to begin with. Do you have it available in non-branded? No. So the background image can be changed, as we showed in Endpoint Manager, and then the branding at the top of the phone cannot be changed. It's actually a backlit logo, kind of like your Mac computer with the Apple. So there is no unbranded ability of these phones. So at the time of ordering the phone, is that where we supply you the URL for the PBX? So at the time of ordering, most of the times these will be ordered through distribution. So no, you'll do it in our portal after you've gotten your order from your supplier. So in most cases, no, you're not going to do it at the time of ordering. You're going to do it. You're going to get your MAC addresses from your distributor, whoever you bought them from, your whatever website, and then you're going to upload those in our portal with CSV or manual typing them. Does yes 300 support headsets? Yes, but not EHS, as we covered. Is the VPN specific to the phone, or would a user be able to plug a computer into the pass-through port and be using the VPN? So the VPN can be pass-through mode. So on that PC port on the phone, the VPN can pass through that, and it will route that traffic across the VPN then, so absolutely. So do EHS devices currently work with these, or are they compatible with other EHS adapters like Yearling? No, we build our own EHS adapter with our own software stack on it. So we did all the testing for Java and Plantronics and built to their API specs. All of our beta testers, we shipped out hundreds of these phones to beta testers. A lot of them got EHS adapters and got a lot of feedback on the EHS, made some improvements on it. So as far as the EHS, again, you can't use somebody else's adapter with it. What if I'm not on Sangoma but use another SIP trunking service? Phones have nothing to do with the SIP trunking service. If you're referring to the PBX, the phones are designed again for FreePBX. That's where all of our documentation is. Does that mean it won't work on other PBXs? No, but all of the tight integration, everything we've done is related to our phones to FreePBX. Is there plans for wireless handset, either DEC or Wi-Fi? Yes, that is in the works. Can't go into much more detail. There's lots of things in the works right now. Being a public company, we're very limited on what we're allowed to disclose. So there are lots of things in the works is all I can tell you. In Canada, just want to shoot a question. In Canada, CDW, whenever you get a chance to answer. So currently in Canada, I know Run Distribution is, I'm told, is going to be bringing them on. Run Distribution is a Sangoma partner that has recently taken on FreePBX appliances, and they're going to be taking on the phone. So I would reach out to Run Distribution and ask them where they're at and get some orders placed with them. Should the phone connect to Sangoma URL first? Only if it's not told where else to connect to. So if you don't run like an option 66 or a 150 in your network, it'll never reach out to our redirect server. In the event that it hits a redirect server and you've never made us aware of that MAC address, then it won't do anything. It'll just continue on. Is FreePBX v13 stable? Absolutely. There are over 50,000 installs of FreePBX v3. Last time I checked, well over a month or two ago. It's the #1 install right now that most people are installing. Highly encourage you to be on FreePBX 13. Much faster, smoother, a whole new responsive GUI, much stability. Everything about FreePBX 13 is light years ahead of FreePBX 12 or older models. Jim's asking, in our portal, we price them at MSRP. Other vendors have discounts over MSRP. Of course, that's why we encourage through distribution partners. We're not going to go and compete with our distribution partners, no different than other manufacturers who happen to list on their own websites, you know, and encourage you to buy through their partners. So that's why we've encouraged in the U.S. VoIP supply in 877E4 VoIP to pick up your phones at. Something mentions, love it, Tony. Astra getting rid of XML is a very good thing. You know, yes, these are very similar. A lot of these apps are based off of Astra XML apps. Anyone who knows our history at all knows we're actually the ones who wrote all that for Astra years ago. Years and years ago, 7 years ago, we actually wrote the whole XML API stack in their phones and all the initial apps that went out with Trixbox and Asterisk systems 5, 6, 7 years ago. So we took a lot from what we learned there and built it into the GUI and much tighter integration, much more control over features and class of service and who can do what. You know, just taking dumb things like The conference room app, where you can view your conference rooms, you can control which conference rooms individual users are allowed to see inside that conference app. So not only in the endpoint can you control do they have the conference room management app, but within the class of service, you can restrict what conference rooms are even allowed to see in that conference app. Which FreePBX version is fully compatible with these phones? FreePBX 12 or newer. We encourage 13. It's a better experience. It's a faster GUI. It's more responsive, but there is support for them in 12. To clarify, is Endpoint Manager plugin still required to support these phones? You need Endpoint Manager. You don't have to pay for a license for it. So it uses Endpoint Manager in phone apps, but with our phones, all you have to do is activate the system, and by default, our phones will work without a license for them. So a barcode address, a MAC address, and label of the phone. Absolutely. So on the phone itself, on the back, and on the box. And if you buy them in crates of 10 at a time, the outside cart will have the MAC addresses by barcode. Travis asked when will they be available for order. They're available now, shipping March and April. As I said, they're selling extremely fast. The numbers are incredible. So supplies are getting more and more limited. We have more and more coming in. April and May, more coming from the factory, but get your phone orders in now with our partners. So I just need my extension number and voicemail password to log into the phone as that user. Absolutely, Kurt. That's the beauty of it. We made it extremely simple for login of the phone in mass provisioning of phones. Well, if the phone is busy, does the phone reboot? I'm not sure what that's referring to, Gene, but probably when it gets an update. Nope, while you're on a call, it just processes the update. There are no reboots on this phone except for firmware or network changes. We never seen where the MAC address was added to the portal account. Can we see that? The reason, Jonathan, is it's not done yet. It's the piece they're working on right now. All the database scheme is done, but as far as the GUI side, it will be done another week or so. Again, the phones aren't GA until next month, so we had a little time, so it was the last thing we worried about. So by the time you guys have phones, way beforehand, the portal work will be done and there'll be wikis on it. We'll probably do another webinar on how to use our redirect server itself inside the portal. So if you have mixed phone environment, you still have to buy Endpoint Manager to provision other phones other than Sangoma. Yes, you can only provision Sangoma phones and Endpoint Manager without a license. So if we go in here to Endpoint Manager and we try to add another brand because we're unlicensed, it's going to prompt up without a license, Sangoma devices are the only brand supported. So you would have to buy Endpoint Manager if you want to use other brands of phones. So a way to set templates per user instead of per phone, specifically in regards to BLS keys. All the users want to monitor different extensions. So Ben, that's one of the neat things. If a user belongs to a template, in FreePBX's user control panel, end users, if you give them permissions, can override the buttons on their phone. So they can add their own BLS, they can drag and drop the different order, and they can remove buttons. So if you trust your end users on a per user basis, you can give them control or through group permissions in User Manager to actually go and change the layout on their specific model, which will overlay over the top of the template. So when the phone loads as config, it first loads the template config, and then it lays over the top any of the changes the user made. And you as the admin can visually see any end user changes that were made, and you can revert those changes with a click of one button and revert it back to the template. Ahmed asks, EPM is free or commercial? It's a commercial module, but as we've covered, free with use of Sangoma phones. Is there expansion module coming? Yes, there is. That will be in May. You'll be able to link multiple expansion modules together on the S500 and 700. Jonathan asks, Tony demonstrated that no commercial modules were loaded by apps being included in Sangoma phones. Do you mean the actual phone apps are built into the firmware of the phone, or do they auto-add for FreePBX? So what it means is there's not actually apps on the phone. It's hitting our servers real time. But because it's a Sangoma phone and we know it's a Sangoma phone through Endpoint Manager, we allow you to manage that phone or use the phone apps for Sangoma phones only without a commercial module purchase. How does the phone find the external server at the remote location? Again, your redirect server would be told the remote location, and you would have to have your ports open for that phone to be able to reach the PBX to get its configuration. So we see how the VPN would be configured. Rick, there's a whole wiki article on that. It's really simple. If you go to wiki.freepbx.org, under the Sangoma phone section, we actually have a wiki written on the VPN. It's extremely simple to set up. Richard asked, the headset adapter looks a bit unconventional. What's up with that? It's the same headset adapter, almost exactly same form factor as SNOM and Yealink. It's the standard for anyone who does an external adapter, which is becoming more common because phone manufacturers go with one pin layout, and then some headset manufacturer doesn't want you to work with that, and you're building some custom cable and trying to put small DSPs in the custom cable to deal with it. So we just decided to avoid that and have a very, very small little adapter. Greg asked, where would I use external login? External login is used if your phone is a remote phone. So it needs to hit the public IP address instead of the internal LAN. So I would press that button. If I enabled it, I would press that button to tell the PBX I'm an external user and use the external template, which is going to tell the phone to register to the external IP. Jonathan, US, I have an R700 model. I'm not sure what R700 is. I think you mean R700. I don't see a way to change the VLAN manually without the ACP option. Is this possible? I'm missing it. Hey, Jonathan, go hit our wiki up. It's actually documented. We had one of our advanced VLAN users go through it all, and it's completely possible from the phone GUI and LCD to set your VLAN tags. Also fully supported in the config files. Can we have two phones tied to one extension with the new phones? Adam asked. That has nothing to do with our phones. That is a limitation of Asterisk with its SIP stack. So with PJ-SIP, you can have multiple devices to the same extension. With CHAN-SIP, you cannot. PJ-SIP is still a work in progress. It's the new standard for Asterisk. But for most production users, they're sticking with CHAN-SIP for reliability currently. We're seeing more and more reliability out of PJ-SIP and more people starting to run it. But I think it's going to be another 6 months or a year before it's a mass movement to most people to use. Cullen asks, where are distinctive ring alert info settings changed now that's a drop-down? It's actually a type inbox or a drop-down. So if you wanted to set some custom alert info, you can still type in your own custom alert info. The drop-down is just ease of use to pick one that we have. Does the redirect server provide VPN or FTP information to the phone if it's being provisioned? No, redirect servers are HTTP only. So you can't actually redirect to FTP or TFTP because it's an HTTP redirect. So you wouldn't be using a VPN or FTP at that point, because for the redirect server to tell the phone how to connect on a VPN, it would need to have the phone certs on the redirect server, which would be a security nightmare. How do you repair the preload cert if damaged or corrupted? Roy, it's in the unwritable ROM of the phone, the same place where the bootloader belongs. And if that ever became corrupt, the whole phone would be bricked and it would have to be replaced. And yeah, I don't envision that ever happening because it's in the same place that the core of the phone to even boot is in. So it's in a non-volatile, non-writable segment of the phone. ETN expansion modules is May. I've got a prototype here. It's working. It's actually sitting on Luke's desk, who does all the endpoint management configuration stuff. So all the software side is worked out, just working on the final molds now for it. Sean asked, do you think Sangoma phones will be sold by other distributors in the days ahead? So Sangoma has a worldwide distribution network that our phones are sold through, and it's going to be sold through our same partners that sell all of our other products. So Sangoma dealers, this is something that they get and something that most of them are really loving to have because of the demand that's created on them. Ricardo asked, FreePBX 12 GUI says I need to run to buy Endpoint Manager. When I click on it, how can I support these phones? Of course, you have to go to FreePBX 13 for that. We added basic support in 12 for our phones, but you would have to buy Endpoint Manager on 12. So you want to move to 13, Ricardo. Can we pre-configure the VPN settings, ship a phone to an external user? Absolutely. So you can just put the phone on your own network and run through like we just did that login stuff, and then it will add the extension to extension mapping and go and tell it to use the VPN moving forward and push the config to the phone and ship it out. Can I use my CentOS Asterisk FreePBX installation, or do I have to use the official FreePBX distro? That's a loaded question. You have to be able to run commercial modules. So if you're using your own CentOS and you follow our wiki on how to make sure the system's capable of running our commercial modules, which means it's got to be a certain version of PHP, you've got to have ZenGuard loaded and some different RPMs, then yes, you can. If you're not mapping extensions by MAC address, can you still with an endpoint apply a custom template to certain extensions? Absolutely. In this extension mapping, if we actually remove this MAC address here and we change this to use a different template, we don't have one here. Now when that user logs in, 4100, they will use that template on any phone they log in. So in this setup, I don't have the MAC address, but I'll still be able to use the login, log out feature of the phone, and it will apply whatever template this user is told to apply. So think of it as your way of, if I want to map users on login to use a certain template, I don't have to go and put all the MAC addresses in ahead of time. I just come in here, add the extension, the template, and the model number, and it will then, when they log in, automatically add the MAC address and map them to that template. And of course, in extension mapping here, guys, you can use the import list and import this by CSV. If you have 100 of them, you don't have to type them all in here. So I'm able to log into any of my phones with an admin password or username. You can log into any phone with the admin password because that shouldn't be given out to users. You cannot log into any phone with the user password unless they do not have voicemail. And of course, if you don't want that feature, you just don't have a user password set, then they can't log in. Gene's asking, does the zero touch still work with third-party SIP trunking? Again, the phones have nothing to do with SIP trunking. It's a connection to FreePBX. So absolutely no problems there. How's the paging for custom buttons work? I'm not sure what you're getting at, Andrew, there. But we have full support for multicast paging. So you can send and receive multicast from Sangoma phones to other Sangoma phones. Oliver, yes, EHSG headset compatible with our EHS adapter. What about do not disturb? Is it detected in the reports? It's server-side do not disturb, not phone side. So any type of reports that know a FreePBX do not disturb would be picked up about it. Can external power supply be used if necessary? Yes, you can purchase external power supplies. John, yes. We're shipping to our suppliers in March and April, so when you get them from the suppliers, I'm not sure, but it should be shortly after that. So March, April timeframe is when you should be seeing phones. Again, somebody asking, we have FreePBX 12, do not see templates for Sangoma phones. Guys, that's first of all, you'd have to update to the latest endpoint manager, and it will auto-create the templates for you for Sangoma, or you can create your own template. But again, on 12, you would have to purchase endpoint manager to use Sangoma phones. The free endpoint manager is only with FreePBX 13 because 12 is in feature lock, so we can't add new things to 12 anymore. David's asking, can you demonstrate the performance of the menu in dialing a number? Okay, so I can press the menu button, I can scroll around, everything's instantaneous, there is no lag on the menu. I go into status, so extremely responsive, keypad, picks up everything I dial, extremely responsive. Jonathan asking, are the line key BLF keys, are there more available than we see on the screen? Yes, there's a more button. So the S500 will do 28 buttons, I believe it was, and the S700 will do 45 buttons. Kevin, it comes with a standard 1-year warranty. Do you have to use Sangoma PBX server, or can we use our own PBX build? Of course, any genuine free PBX install that is capable of commercial modules. Will it show a list, or do you have to know what to search for using the contacts? Either way, so you can drill into your contact groups and just start using the up-down arrow keys, or you can use the search function. So either way. Is the wall mount for S300 available already? So the S300 has a built-in wall mount. The S500 and 700, there's a little adapter that you'll have to buy because of the way the back works out. There needs to be an adapter for it. Tim Passons, will this affect development of integration of E-Link phones or in terms of apps? we've done all the development for the other phones. They sit where they're at. If there's bugs that come in, it's a commercial module. We have to fix the bugs if there are bugs on our side. One of the frustration points is we don't have the ability to fix things in the other phone manufacturers. And most of the problems on the different phone apps relate to the actual phone itself, and we can't fix that stuff. So this is partly why buying Sangoma phones is really important. We control the firmware and software on the Sangoma phones. We control the commercial modules in FreePBX. We know the FreePBX code. We do patches to Asterisk when there's problems with Asterisk or we need to add features. So you have a single vendor that's going to make sure all these pieces tightly integrate. Are the phones able to connect to more than one extension server at the same time, or do you need log in, log out all the time? No, you can program these without log in, log out, and you could have a button on here register to another server if you wanted to. Endpoint Manager fully supports that by using what's called custom extensions, so full support. Can you turn off the backlight on the Sangoma logo? Yes. Oh, no, on the Sangoma logo. No, the backlight does not turn off. It's a very low light backlight. It does not turn off. What languages support? A whole bunch of them. On the Nadav, it looks like. Go to wiki.freepbx.org, and under Sangoma phone space, you will see we support from a GUI perspective on the phone GUI and the LCD. I don't know, I want to say 12 different languages we're currently supporting. Is it possible to have the phone auto login when users having to manually enter extension number password or posts configured from VPN? Absolutely. So we showed hot desking login style. If we come in Endpoint Manager and give it the extension number, brand, MAC address, template, the phone will just pull the config directly from the PBX, not require a login. So absolutely, it'll act like a normal dumb phone. Where do we program the redirect server in the portal? Adam, that's not live yet. That'll be coming live in the very, very near future. Are there any recurring license costs of phones once purchased? Absolutely not. The phones are there. You buy the phone. There's no software licensing or anything on the phones that you have to purchase. Can the PC port be in non-pass-through mode, not through the VPN? Absolutely. Did I miss the encryption demo? I'm not sure which encryption demo. The phones do support SRTP and TLS, so you can run SRTP and TLS in the phones, or VPN, of course. The VoIP phones can be used by any VoIP server instead of FreePBX. Yes, but not supported from us at this time. We're going to have our hands full just in FreePBX and the amount of phones we've already sold. Meaning, we want to provide the best experience with the platform we can control. Alex, sorry, yeah, at this time, this 300 just doesn't have EHS support. Something, we tried to keep the price point really low on that phone. Adding that expansion module port to deal with that EHS adapter would add a lot of cost to that phone still. What distributors are currently sought to carry these lines? Gary, if you go to, or anyone else, Sangoma.com and click under products to phones, we're keeping a list of who's actually committed and has them. Right now, we've only focused on the U.S. We do have a Mexico partner coming on that's actually bought in that will be updated, some UK partners, and I think really closely on the Canadian ones. David asks, FreePBX minimum version, will 2.11 distro work? Absolutely not. 2.11 is 4 years old now. We did, like I said, basic support for 12 for people, but 13 is where you get the best bang for your buck. Okay, I think that's pretty much everything. Otherwise, if you have more questions, feel free to hit up the sales department. If you go to freepbx.org, sangoma.com, there's a live chat with us now. They may be a little overloaded, but feel free to hit up the sales department or support. The support site has at the top a sales queue that you can open up a sales request and get more information, or just pick up a phone and give us a call. Any comments concerning PBXact? Full support for PBXact. When I refer to FreePBX, everything in FreePBX is the same for PBXact, guys, on the phone support. So full deep integration support. So I think we're going to end it at this point. So anything you guys have, please reach out to us. We'll be happy to answer questions. And thank you so much for your time.